And I think that that's a big problem that people face now. Like, you see what somebody else is doing and you want to do that when that's not your lane.
That's not your lane.
That's not what you're supposed to be doing.
But it's popular. It's getting that person money. It's getting that person applause. Oh, I want applause. Right. I want money. Let me stand over here behind them.
And then a lot of times people aren't honest with themselves either. Like, I was thinking earlier today, I've been woke for almost 2 days, so... So you get honesty, yes. And I was thinking, like, you know,
the Artist Exchange Radio Show.
Whoa. The moment my son saw a redwood tree.
It's huge!
Is the moment I knew that for him,
you can't even see the top of that thing.
Even the sky has no limit.
There are some moments only the forest can inspire. Find yours at discovertheforest.org. Learn about forests near you and discover cool things to do when you go. Your moment is out there. Find it at discovertheforest.org.
Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service and the Ad Council.
You are now listening to Just a Bit Outside, the sports radio show at BeExposedRadio.com. Come join us every Monday night from 8 to 10 p.m. on YouTube, Facebook, or BeExposedRadio.com.
So we had a lot of things going on.
Mother's Day, Major League Baseball, pink bats, pink outfits.
Yeah. They certainly did the mothers good. They don't show them justice. Like Jimmy said, the pink bats, cleats, all types of pink highlights in the major leagues. The Orioles were swept by the Kansas City Royals.
Wah, wah.
The Kansas City Royals. Thank you, Eric. Kansas City Royals is they're like one of the worst teams in the Major League Baseball right now. Yeah, so that was a little tough.
Yeah, so the Orioles no longer have the top record. It belongs to the Washington Nationals now.
Yeah, so that was tough. So hopefully they'll get back on track with the next series. Maryland, we got some local sports, collegiate to report. The Maryland lacrosse. Let's shout out the Maryland lacrosse team. They are in the NCAA tournament, and Hey,
this is Mark, just a bit outside on BeExposedRadio.com. Listen to us every Monday, 8 to 10 p.m. on Facebook and on YouTube.
Hey, there's my son. You've been in your room all morning.
Hey, Dad.
Matt, what's wrong with your voice?
There is nothing wrong with my voice.
Oh, well, it's just sort of.
I have been playing my video games and electronic games for so many hours.
Uh-huh. Well, it sounds like it might be time for you to take a break, or...
Hello, Dad.
Susan?
I have been watching TV and text messaging all morning. Yay, electronics. Yay, yay, yay.
Guys, I think it's about time to get in the car and take a little trip. Maybe see some trees, some green things.
What are these green things you speak of?
This weekend, unplug. Take your family to the forest. There's nothing in the world like experiencing nature firsthand. Trees, paths, bluebirds, streams. Getting closer to nature can get you closer to your family. To find the forest nearest you, go to discovertheforest.org. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service and the Ad Council.
Get out to the forest and discover the wonders of nature with your family, just like Blue, Jewel, and the whole Rio flock.
Let the kids connect to their roots. It's gonna be so much fun. Yeah! Woo-hoo!
Let's rock this jungle.
Yeah!
Fresh air.
What a glorious morning!
Clean water.
Woohoo! This is great!
And endless surprises.
Yo, this is untapped territory.
How amazing!
Visit discovertheforest.org. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service and the Ad Council.
So when you get to the corner of Smith and Orchard, you're going to want to take a left.
You are not going to.
Then what you're going to do is turn onto
Marcy
Avenue.
just broke up
and go past the first 3 lights.
You are listening to BeExposedRadio.com.
Welcome back, good people. Happy that you have invited me into your living quarters today. This is the Conflict Resolution Show. I am your host, Coach White, and I'm very excited to continue the topic that we started last week. So we had Brother Sadiq Ali on last week, and we were dealing with the community conflict. How do we engage and mentor youth in the hood culture? So we're going to be dealing with that question again today. I had some time to have a conversation prior to the show with some great people They gave me some great ideas to focus the attention more on the young parents of the hood culture today. I raised a question in reference to celebrities who make the statement about I'm not your son or your daughter's role model. And I was challenged a little bit on my live feed today. And the way I was challenged, a brother put it to me in a way that I wasn't thinking about it. So what he basically said was, the entertainers' jobs are to entertain. And my question was, well, do the celebrities get a pass? And he says, yes, they get a pass because they're just doing their jobs. It's unfortunate that because of the media, we have glimpses of their lives outside of the stages that they stand on. And we're able to see the things that they encounter. But he said the attention should be turned on the parents. In fact, one of my buddies, Rob, who responded as well, said the onus should be put on the parents. So we're going to talk a lot about that today. We have plenty of time to open up the door for that conversation. So I'm hoping that you will be a part of it. But before we get started, I always like to begin with an announcement. So last week I made an announcement. I did get a response. So I'm going to put it out there again this week. So if you are interested in a free conflict resolution coaching session, send me an email at DARRELL White, name is spelled behind me, .crs@gmail.com. That's Darrell White .crs@gmail.com. Send me an email tonight while the show is going on. So anytime between now and 9 p.m. And I will offer you a free conflict resolution coaching session. That is one free 60-minute conflict resolution coaching session. Free is one of my favorite words in the English vocabulary. So I'm just extending that to you. So that's my announcement. Just wanted to take a minute to recap on the show that we had last week. So Brother Sadiq Ali made a lot of good points. If you were not able to view that show last week, then you can always go to beexposedradio.com. Or if you haven't liked the conflict resolution show, you can like the conflict resolution show on Facebook and you can go back and check it out. Or you can always go to YouTube and type in conflict resolution radio show --Be Exposed Radio, and you can check it out there. So one of the things that we discussed last week, and I'm reminded as I had my live feed a few minutes ago, the comment was made, or I posed a question rather to Brother Sadiq, and I said, you know, everybody doesn't want to be mentored, although everybody is mentored. And let me explain what I mean when I said that. So if you are in a gang, then you're being mentored. If you are selling drugs, then you're being mentored. If you are rapping, then you are being mentored by somebody. Somebody that has educated you on the lifestyle of selling drugs, the lifestyle of gangs, and I'm just using those two as an example. Or somebody has schooled you on how to write lyrics. Those are your mentors. But at the same time, I do know, and I think about one of my brothers who works down at the juvenile jail. He has a lot of kids under him, and a very small percentage want to be mentored by him. So they much rather be mentored by whoever and whomever is mentoring them at the time. And the question that I posed last week to Brother Sadiq is, so what do we do when we have youth who don't necessarily want to be mentored by us? Because some people have taken the approach, well, if you don't want any help, then we're going to move on to those that want help, and we're going to pour all our energy into those individuals. But we still have a population and a small group of young brothers and sisters in our hood cultures who are not being mentored by us. So what do we do with them? Do we just focus our attention on the people who want it and neglect those who don't? One brother that got on a few weeks ago said that, you know, people basically come to the light when they hit the hardest season of their lives. You know, life really hits them in the mouth. In fact, one of my good brothers, Ronnie Jones, always says life is going to teach you a lesson that you'll never forget. So when the youth get to that place, or even if they get to that place as older adults, sometimes they come to a point where they take advantage of the resources. So one of my brothers said, hey, it's just our job to give them resources and constantly provide them with resources. And then when they're ready, they'll take advantage of those resources. So we have a hard job ahead of us, particularly in Baltimore City. And we do recognize that the first set of mentors are always going to be your parents. There was another comment on my live feed in reference to young parents. And the sister said when the youth are having kids young, then, and I'm paraphrasing the comment, then basically they're already behind the 8 ball because they don't really know who they are themselves. And I'm guessing that this was the message behind the brief comment that was posted. They don't really know who they are themselves, so how can they parent? How can they be strong mentors to the kids that they have brought into the world? Which is a good question. So I just want to pose those questions today. And I want to solicit your feedback. This is January 2019. You know, I think the homicide rate was up in the 300s again last year. And prayerfully, this will be a better year for us. One murder is too many. And I just know that we have to be tactful in our approach to mentoring. So one of the huge advantages of having a brother on like Brother Sadiq last week is that he's the director and he oversees the state of Maryland as it pertains to mentoring. So he's going to be putting some things together so that the mentoring is effective. So one of the things that he discussed last week was that in these mentoring relationships, he talked about the importance of buy-in. Buy-in not just from the mentor, but buy-in from the mentee. And in fact, he said that we would be surprised that we end up learning more from those that we mentor in this mentor-mentee relationship. And he talked about the importance of being open to learning from them as well. And so that both parties are putting deposits into one another. So very important. So I'm just skimming the surface on some of the things that we're going to talk about tonight. But I'm going to spend a lot of time talking about the role of parents in the hood culture, particularly young parents who have the first role and responsibility of mentoring. So one of the sisters said on my live feed, she said that some parents are afraid of the kids. So we're going to talk about that tonight. She said that some parents are just on a friendship level and don't really understand the parental boundaries when it comes to raising up children. And then I want to talk to the parents who we have some parents who think it's okay to smoke with their kids, drink with their kids, and they build it off the argument that I would rather you do it in my supervision than do it outside of my supervision. So we're going to talk about that tonight as well. So Stay tuned. This is the Conflict Resolution Show. We'll be right back.
Now listen to BeExposedRadio.com. Check out this fire flashback.
We need to relearn what it is to be these bosses and how we conduct ourselves as business-minded individuals and just people in general. I let my gut, and if I call it gut or God or whatever, I'm led by that energy. I know where it comes from. I know where it's, taking me, and you have to figure out what is important to you, and don't play this game. It's a game that we've learned to play, this chess game, and life is not a chess game. Life is real, bones, flesh, blood, decisions.
Make sure you check out the Artist Exchange Show every Monday and Friday at 2 p.m. only on BeExposedRadio.com.
Driving has a rhythm all its own. Don't wreck it with a text. Before you get behind the wheel, silence your phone. Or better yet, designate a texter. For more text-free driving tips, visit StopTextStopWrecks.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council and the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration.
Green light. Hey girl, school zone. I'm getting hungry. Car changing lanes. You want to meet me for pizza? Stop sign. Intersection clear. Yeah, street. Pizza sounds good. Ballin Street? Girlin Street!
It's hard to concentrate on two things at once, like texting and driving. Stop the text, stop the wrecks. How will you stop texting and driving? Tell us at StopTextStopWrecks.org. Brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
Join the club that gives you stuff.
Hey, thanks!
Radio Loyalty.
Here's how it works.
Just click on the Radio Loyalty banner right now and sign up. Then, you keep on listening like you already do. But now you earn points. Those points add up, and you can trade them in for stuff in the Radio Loyalty store. Earn more points by sharing your station with friends on Facebook and Twitter, answering surveys, and by using the apps in the New Players App Store. Pretty simple, right?
Radio Loyalty.
Click that banner to join now.
So, Jacqueline.
Yes, Mom?
I wanted to talk to you about something, and... Oh, wait. Hold on. I just got a text. Oh, there's another one. Wow. Busy me. So, anyway...
Oh, wait, Mom. I just got a message. My friends keep commenting on my comment. Oh, there's another one. So many comments on my comment.
Oh, I can't wait to watch TV tonight. Playoffs!
Hey, guys, check out my new video game. Pew, pew. Wait, Mom, what?
What? Hold
What'd you say? Wait a second, what?
This weekend, unplug. Take your family to the forest. There's nothing in the world like experiencing nature firsthand. Trees, paths, bluebirds, streams. Getting closer to nature can get you closer to your family. To find the forest nearest you, go to discovertheforest.org. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service and the Ad Council.
Check out this flashback from the Artist Exchange Radio Show.
That's the biggest thing, is just empowerment. Just get off of the begging line. Just be proud and just get our pride and our dignity back, because as a child, we're taught how to go and beg for a job. Our parents, they literally taught us how to make sure you pull your pants up. Me, I'm 6'7", so I'm a bigger man. I was always taught how to not be threatening or intimidate people when I go into different interviews or different scenarios. And so we're literally taught how to condition ourselves, condition our speech, everything, in order to go and beg these people for a job, because we know when we walk in the door, I have to tear down 10 stereotypes before I get past hello. So we need to eliminate that. And we need to eliminate that, and the way that we do that is employing ourselves and employing our brothers and sisters. And so that's our mission, is group economics, uplift ourselves, because I can't empower anyone until I empower myself, and change from just being willing, because it's in my heart and my passion to see my people succeed and see us do better and change the social order, because I know that we are not supposed to be on bottom. I understand who I was. I know I didn't fall out of the sky and land on a plantation. So when you have knowledge of self and you know who you are and what you come from, it's frustrating more than anything to see us in this position.
Tune into the Artist Exchange Every Friday, 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. Every Saturday, 12 p.m. to 2 p.m. Live. BigExposeRadio.com.
Hi, I'm LeVar Burton, and I'm proud to be a book person. How do I choose a book? Sometimes it's the cover, sometimes it's the title. I guess I'm pretty visual. If a book's really impressing me...
You are listening to BeExposedRadio.com.
Welcome back, good people. Again, I am your host, Coach White. This is the Conflict Resolution Show. And the conflict that we're dealing with today is a community conflict. And we typically have questions to gauge the conversations. So I'm looking to get a lot of feedback from you guys today and to pick your brains on the question, how do we engage and mentor youth in the hood culture, and especially young parents? So we're going to turn attention today specifically about young parents. So I have an article that I want to read to kind of gauge the conversation. So this is from drugfree.org. It's drugfree.org. And the article was written February 4th, 2011. And the title is When Other Parents Let Their Kids Drink and Smoke Pot. So it begins with a quote. My dad says it's okay to smoke marijuana. That's what a 6th grader said to me at a drug prevention program where I presented. I can't tell you how many times parents have told me that they know their kids drink or smoke pot, but they aren't worried because it's beer and pot. I've seen parents hand their teenager a can of beer, saying that their kid isn't allowed to drink anywhere but at home. While I try very briefly and discreetly to explain why that's a bad idea, not to mention against the law, it's been a tough sell. Now that my own kids are full-blown teenagers, I've explained to them why it's not healthy for them to drink alcohol, even though it's safe for most adults to drink in moderation, as well as why pot is not acceptable either. I can only hope that if they are ever offered alcohol or marijuana by an adult who tells them it's okay, that they will turn it down. I try to prevent them from being in that kind of situation by actively doing one of the things that I've only read about up until now, knowing who they hang out with and getting to know their friends' parents. And I'm going to read this last section. Research shows that one of the ways to prevent teens from getting involved with drugs is to monitor where they are and who they are with. It's easier said than done, but so far it's working. My kids complain loudly when I insist on talking to the parents of their friends when they're going to their house, or when parents are driving them somewhere. I want to know that those parents aren't the ones who think drinking and smoking pot is okay. So, my question to you is, when we talk about kids in the hood culture or youth in the hood culture, we are speaking with the full knowledge that some of the youth have children. Now, some of the youth may or may not be indulging in drugs and alcohol, but because we're speaking specifically about those that do, my challenge to you in the viewing audience is to figure out how we can mentor those youth. Number one, if in fact they want to be mentored. It's important to meet people where they are. So that's one of the things that we kind of briefly discussed in the last conversation about this. And Brother Sadiq mentioned a couple of other important things about looking in the mirrors and figuring out why you want to mentor. You always want to have a why behind what you do, because the why should drive you to do whatever that is. So once you figure it out, then you want to mentor, you want to be impactful. How do you minister to the heart of those youth who may be indulged in in drugs or alcohol. I mentioned before the break that we were going to be talking about this because some parents take the position that they would much rather their kids drink and smoke in their presence than do it outside. So they open up the doors for that in the home. And I want to know what you feel about that. I want to know whether you think that is something that is worth the conversation. The article it mentions that this particular writer, this particular writer has mentioned that it's against the law. But do we care? Do we care? Some people may put the emphasis on creating this kind of community within the home so that once the child steps outside of that community, they don't have to indulge in that behavior. But what does it, and I'm trying to formulate this, how does it impact the community within those walls? So more specifically, do you allow their friends to come into your home and smoke and drink? Or is it just you and or the child that's indulging in those kind of activities? So I definitely want to get your feedback on that. And I'm going to read another section before we go into our next break. So I'm going to pick up from here. So it says, this takes the fortitude to ignore your kids when they complain that it's so embarrassing they'll get over it. So far, the parents don't mind, and some have even called me for the same reason. Let's clarify that with this next paragraph. However, some parents still don't get the point. One mom told me she would be home while my son was there, then just ran out to do a couple of errands. The boys got on her computer to look at porn. So much for her being home. I've since talked to her about my rule that parents must be home and make sure to clarify that for all other parents up front. So I'm going to pick up on this article and I have a few others, but stay tuned. We'll be right back. I need your feedback.
I'm LeVar Burton, and I'm proud to be a book person. How do I choose a book? Sometimes it's the cover, sometimes it's the title. I guess I'm pretty visual. If a book's really impressing me and the writing is really good, I will peek and see what the last paragraph is, because the endings of books should rock you. I am a book person, and if you're a book person too, read to a child and spark a lifetime of ambition. Join me at bookpeopleunite.org because reading is fundamental. A public service announcement brought to you by Reading is Fundamental, Library of Congress, and the Ad Council.
Green light. Hey girl, school zone. I'm getting hungry. Car changing lanes. You want to meet me for pizza? Stop sign. Intersection clear. Yeah, street. Pizza sounds good. Ballin Street? Girlin Street!
It's hard to concentrate on two things at once, like texting and driving. Stop the text, stop the wrecks. How will you stop texting and driving? Tell us at stoptextstopwrecks.org. Brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
Well, Jason, I've got to tell you, you're pretty much everything this company is looking for in an entry-level candidate.
Great.
Your resume isn't quite what we're used to, but you've got a fantastic work ethic.
Thank you.
And I'm impressed by how you carry yourself.
So, should we talk about the job?
What? The job? Oh, sorry. Yeah, I have no way of recruiting or even meeting you. This interview didn't happen.
It may sound ridiculous, and that's because it kind of is. There's a huge pool of talent your company is missing out on. Meet the grads of life. Who are they? Talent worth knowing about. Young adults of unique determination and experience. An ideal fit for your company in an entry-level position, internship, or even mentorship. They might not have every qualification you typically look for, but they're exactly who your company needs.
Man, we really could have used him.
Don't miss out on a resource many innovative companies have already discovered. Go to gradsoflife.org to learn how to find, cultivate, and train this great pool of untapped talent. Brought to you by the Ad Council and gradsoflife.org.
My name is Ruth Rusi. I'm a retired teacher. I'm 91 years old, and this is how I live united. I say retired, but not really. Once a week, I read books to children as part of United Way's education program. Reading to a child creates links between language and literacy. It creates a bond between grown-up and child. And believe it or not, it prepares them for a better academic future. Oh, we read about frogs and flies and pigs with wings, all sorts of juicy.
You are listening to BeExposedRadio.com.
Welcome back, good people. Again, I'm your host, Coach White. This is the Conflict Resolution Show. So again, we're talking about a community conflict, how to mentor, or rather engage and mentor youth in the hood culture. And we're specifically talking about young parents. So before the break, we were talking about, and I'm going to use the word compromise. There are some parents that I know of that are young parents that engage in smoking and drinking with their kids. And when we talk about compromise, I want to know from you, how do you mentor the young parents of the hood culture? And mentoring is not, as I consider the word compromise, mentoring is not about going in and saying you should do this or you shouldn't do that. Okay, mentoring is about meeting people where they are and being relatable. So you may not condone the behavior, but you're at least able to meet them in a place where they can receive you and you can receive them. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean you need to be around when they're smoking and drinking. It doesn't mean that. So tonight's show is going to be more informative. But it does mean that you have to be relatable. So I can tell you a short story. So there's been times where in the workforce we have been basically told who we were going to mentor. We're going to be responsible for these particular 10 students and you will be responsible for these 10. But what we found is that that was ineffective. And it was ineffective because you'll have some students or peers, or young adults rather, that will cleave to you. It's something about you that makes them want to be in your company. It's something about you that makes them want to talk to you, that relational aspect. And they may not have been the students that were chosen for you, or the youth that were chosen for you necessarily. So we had to revamp it, and we had to reframe the whole vision of the program, and we had to retract how we would go about obtaining the goal. And what we discovered is that we need to be more attentive to which youth cleave to us already, and those were the students that we end up mentoring, and then the mentoring component of that particular program became more effective. So in this case, I hope that you would make sure that you are connected to some youth and young adults, and that you are willing to pour into them and really take the time with them, check in with them, call them, do some kind of activities with them, and just work on being relatable. I think that would be the first phase. Because again, all of us know youth and young adults in the hood culture. And they may not necessarily be living in the hood culture. They may be of the hood culture. So we know some youth and young adults that fit that mold. The question is, are you relatable? So relatability is a key component. Once you are related to a youth in that way, it's more easy for you to intervene when the time of intervention is at hand. So for an example, we have worked in capacities where you could tell a youth or young adult, hey, don't do this or don't do that. It's against the rules or against the policies or whatever have you. And the youth will keep on walking with that hat on. If you say no hats in the building, speaking more specifically, they'll keep walking with their hats on. But if you pay very close attention, you'll find that somebody that they know will intervene, maybe the same way. It may be a more aggressive intervention, and they'll take it right off. It's because they're relatable. There's certain things about that individual that makes it more acceptable, more received, or better, or well received, versus rather when it's coming from a stranger or a person that they don't know that well. So number one, the number one rule is to be relatable. All right. So once you are relatable to that individual, then the doors are open to talk about some of the things they may be exposing their kids to. Again, not with a critical approach to intervention, but more of an informative approach. So I just wanted to, again, restate that in this program today is going to be more informative. So the critical approach is always an approach that says you can't do this or you can't do that. The more relatable approach is to say something like, hey, you know, if you're smoking around your kids, do you think that it would increase their chances of being smokers later on in life? If you are drinking in the presence of your kids and or allowing your kids to drink, do you think it would be more destructive for them in the long run? And really putting it to them and framing it as a question for them to ponder. Because again, you don't want to take the critical approach and say you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do that, because that approach, if you're attentive to your own life and looking in your own mirror, it probably didn't work for you. But if you're more relatable and you are one that tends to pose questions for the youth to grapple with, then that style may be more effective. So we talked about compromise. Now we're going to move on to monitoring. So one of the things that are very important is to make sure that the young adults are monitoring the behaviors, monitoring the things that their kids are watching, their things they're listening to, and being mindful of the things that they're exposed to. Now, on this show, there's been a segment that comes to mind with Brother Tony and with Brother Greg and Sean, and I asked the question, can you be in the hood but not of the hood? And the answer was yes, you can be in the hood but not of the hood. So I say that to say, when we speak about the environment, the hood culture environment, the exposure is already there. So the youth are exposed, the children of the youth are exposed as well to that environment. So when we talk about monitoring, we're talking about being mindful of the things that they see within the four walls of their home. Because like I said before, the first community is always going to be the home. The second community is the exterior community outside of the home, which we don't have control over those things. But we do have control over the things that take place in the home. So when we talk about mentoring the young parents, we want to be asking questions, relatable questions that cause them to ponder. And when we ask questions, hey, you know, what do you think? Do you think if you continue to expose your children to violent media or violent music, do you think that it would have an impact on their behaviors? And really put it to them that way, and kind of be open to the feedback that they're going to provide you. Because they may say, no, I don't think it would be a problem. I myself am not somebody that is indulging in that particular lifestyle of selling drugs or gang affiliation and things of that nature. So their position may be, my kid better not. Or they may actually ponder on it. Maybe their response is, yes, I think it probably would have a significant impact on their behavior, so I'm going to expose them to something different. And here's another example of a more relatable approach. Well, you know, you may want to give an example of your own children. Well, I know with my kids it's important that they learn because, you know, daycare may not be teaching fundamental reading and basic phonics. So it was important for me to make sure that my kids learned basic phonics. So I exposed them to elementary YouTube clips, very elementary YouTube clips that would teach them lessons on basic phonics as it pertains to math, as it pertains to reading, writing, spelling, and the basics. So, you know, I have a couple of things at my home, you know, that I want to share with you. And you empower the young parents to provide those particular resources to their youth and give them that kind of leverage. So again, another relatable approach, and I'm trying to make sure that you as the viewing audience understand the difference between a more relatable approach to mentoring a young adult parent versus a more critical approach, which tends to turn people off. So I just wanted to kind of put that out there. So we're going to shift gears slightly, and we're going to talk about the next phase, which would be monitoring, compromise, monitoring, and direction. So when we talk about direction, we're talking about making sure that the young adults are leading their kids in a positive direction. And again, a more critical approach would be you shouldn't be behaving in this way, you shouldn't be behaving in that way. This is how you should behave. But the more relatable approach is to simply pose questions. And I'm going to keep hitting on that over and over again because I really wanted to sink in. Because our lives are really all about relationships and how we relate to one another. And I said this from time to time as your holistic personal trainer who has redefined personal training and made it less about fitness, although I do that, and more about training in righteousness. We have to make sure that when we're relatable, we are also looking in our own mirrors. So when we talk about being more relatable, when we're talking about posing questions that cause our youth and young adults to ponder, we want to ask the question, hey, what do you think, or where do you think I'm leading you to? Because a leader is only as effective if he has followers, right? I always tell my kids, discipline makes disciples. So if we are leading by example, then we want to pose those kind of questions to the youth and young adults that we may be mentoring. Hey, you know, what if you had to put a name to this path that I'm leading you on, which path am I leading you on? I want you to describe it. And then I want you to tell me how you're leading your kids. You know, what direction do you think you're leading your kids on? So, and let's get a little biblical for a minute. So there's two paths. So we talked about the righteous path, which basically means doing what is right, and an unrighteous path, doing what is wrong. And there's been times where I've mentioned on the show that this is not a generation, and we're talking about mentoring, folks. So this is not a generation where we can afford to say, do what I say and not what I do. We have to be of the fold and the way of thinking that says, do what I say and do what I do. So we have to make sure that we are leading on a righteous path. We are practicing righteousness in our daily walks. Now, we all fall short, we know that, but it's about patterns. So if you can have conversations with your mentees about A, where you are leading them with your behaviors, and B, how they perceive themselves as young parents to be leading their children. I think that's a good way to start a conversation with them, with a more relatable approach versus a critical approach. So we're talking about direction, and nothing speaks more about leading than direction and setting the course. So we talked about compromise, we talked about monitoring, and we talked a little bit about direction. So I'm going to use another word. So teaching. When it comes to parenting, parents are teachers. So what are we teaching our youth and young adults? And what are our youth and young adults teaching our kids? Now, let's peel the layers of the onions. Shout out to my brother Tori. Let's peel the layers of the onion. Now, and I'm talking to you mentors. We have a lot of layers to peel back. And one of the things that we need to make sure we are emphasizing or cognizant of is the fact that our young adult parents in the hood culture have been parented by those in the hood culture as well. So you may be leading your youth in one direction, but the parents may be leading the youth in the other direction. And please understand that mentoring requires a lot of compassion. So that's a word that we can harp on for a while. And we're gonna go to a break in about 30 seconds, but we have to be more compassionate in order to be effective mentoring and mentees or mentors. And in fact, to be more relatable, being relatable requires being compassionate. So we're going to talk a little more about that when we come back. Stay tuned. This is the Conflict Resolution Show. I am your host, Coach White. We'll be right back.
Keyboard Cat, Hamilton the Pug, and Toast Meets World. These are some of the internet's most beloved pets. With millions of YouTube views, shares, Instagram likes, followers, and fans across the globe. But what do all these amazing pets have in common? Their stories started in a shelter. Start your story. Adopt a dog or cat today. Visit theshelterpetproject.org to find a shelter or adoptable pets near you. Training that pet to play the keyboard? Well, that's entirely up to you. Visit theshelterpetproject.org and hear more about Hamilton the Pug, Toast, and Keyboard Cat's amazing adoption stories. Start a story. Adopt a shelter or rescue pet today. Your perfect pet is just a click away at theshelterpetproject.org.
Because it's gentle on your baby's eyes. You make sure his toys don't have any sharp edges. You always test the bathwater to make sure it's not too hot. You taught her what to do when the smoke alarm goes off. You make sure she wears a helmet when she rides her bicycle. You put on his sunscreen, even when he's embarrassed his friends will see. You do so much to keep your child safe. But are you using the right car seat for your child? Is your child facing the right way in the car seat? Is the seat too big or too small? How do you know when it's time to move your child into the next type of seat? Car crashes are a leading killer of children ages 1 to 13. Protect your child's future at every stage of life. For information on the right seat for your child, visit safercar.gov/the right seat. That's safercar.gov/ the right seat.
A message from the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
Why is Connor having trouble focusing in school?
Having trouble finding Connor's middle school? Would you like directions?
No, why is Connor having trouble focusing in school?
Finding lowest airfare to Istanbul.
No, I'm tired of fighting with him over homework.
Home, walk, restaurant. Need a review?
No, I need help. He's very smart, but his mind wanders. He's disorganized.
I think I understand.
Oh, good.
You are listening to BeExposedRadio.com.
Welcome back, good people. Again, I'm your host, Coach White. And this is the Conflict Resolution Show. I pause because I want to give a shout out to Cynthia Brothers. Thank you for tuning in. I definitely want your feedback on the show tonight. So, again, we are talking about a community conflict. How do we engage and mentor youth in the hood culture? And we're turning the attention to young adult parents tonight. So, we're talking about two approaches to mentoring. One is a critical approach, which probably won't work. That's one where you say you shouldn't be doing this, you shouldn't be doing that. And the more effective is the more relatable approach. So we talked about compromise. We have young parents who, for whatever reason, have compromised in the sense that they perceive, perception is everything, good people. They perceive that it's okay to smoke or drink in the presence of their their youth, their children rather. And they have compromised. So we talked about how to mentor those particular young adults. We talked about monitoring, making sure that we have some conversation so that they are monitoring what their kids are watching. And again, not being critical, but being more relatable. We talked about direction and making sure that they are clearly in a place where they can identify where you, the mentor, are leading them. And also look in their own mirrors to ask themselves where they're leading their children. And now we're talking about teaching, which involves learning from watching. So there's a chain effect. So our mentees are watching us and their children are watching them. But we talked about peeling the layers of the onion. And one of the things that we need to do to get to the root of what their issues are so we can do some real heart and holistic mentoring is we have to be compassionate and understanding that their parents may be pulling a rope in the other direction. Their parents are the builders of that foundation. So we may go in to their communities, and I'm talking specifically about their four walls, their homes, and we may find some resistance from the parents. And my question to you is, so what do you do in those instances? How do you mentor when you have opposition? If mommy is saying, hey, you need to make sure you do this and that, but you're trying to lead in a different direction as a mentor, then how do you win? Is the question that I pose to you. So, through the question out there, and here's the answer. So we know that we're talking specifically about teaching and making sure that we are leading in, or leading by example rather. So one of the things that we can do is we can engage the parents as well, because again, the objective is to mentor the young adult, right? And sometimes it's necessary to do whatever we can and whatever we have to do to keep them engaged. That's the other word that's in the question that I posed today on the show's topic. Engaging and mentoring. So sometimes it causes us to be even relatable to that parent. Now, we may not agree with everything the parent is saying, but we have to have compassion. And in having compassion, we have to have understanding. We have to understand that we can't be so selfish to believe that people should parent the way we parent, right? Because if we're not careful, we can fall to the more critical side of mentoring and fall out of the relational aspect. So stay with the relational side. Everybody is not going to parent like you. Everybody doesn't even understand the way you parent. And they may or may not see the fruit of your children or the fruit of your labor, which is the behavior of your kids. They may not even see that, may not even care. But there may be a time, mentors, where you have to bring in the parents and you have to have a conversation with the parents. Again, not being critical, but being relatable and saying, hey, you know, I noticed that Damon is teaching little Damon how to do X, Y, Z. What are your thoughts about that? And really, when it comes to understanding, I always suggest that we pose questions. That way, when they give us an answer, we have a bridge to walk on. I always say, you know, building a relationship is similar to building a bridge. And you have two builders, and we're both building with the same objective of completing the bridge. And there has to be communication so that there's an understanding. So I ask that you as a mentor begin to pose questions so that they can give an answer and we can build on that understanding. So we're getting ready to go into a break. We're going to come back to the teaching component. Again, this is the Conflict Resolution Show. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Exchange Radio Show every Friday 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. every Saturday 12 p.m. to 2 p.m. Real artist, real talk, real live on BeExposedRadio.com. I was meeting with a friend yesterday, and I've gotten to the point where don't ask me a question because the truth is going to come out. And
exactly.
Just don't do it.
If you ain't looking for the truth, don't come to me.
Don't do it because I can't hold my tongue. And she wants to be this stylist, boutique, but you're not doing anything in that nature, and I can't take you seriously if you're not doing those things. And I understood why people didn't take me seriously because I found myself in somebody else's lane. I was good at what I was doing and what I wanted to be, but I wasn't doing it for me. So how can I ask you to take me seriously if I'm living in somebody else's shoes?
And nobody can do what you do, and I think that that's a big problem that people face now. Like, you see what somebody else is doing and you want to do that when that's not your lane.
That's not your lane.
That's not what you're supposed to be doing.
But it's popular. It's getting that person money. It's getting that person applause. Oh, I want applause. I want money. Let me stand over here behind them.
And then a lot of times people aren't honest with themselves either. Like, I was thinking earlier today, I've been woke for almost 2 days, so so you get honesty, yes. And I was thinking, like, you know,
the Artist Exchange Radio Show.
Whoa. The moment my son saw a redwood tree.
It's huge!
Is the moment I knew that for him,
You can't even see the top of that thing!
even the sky has no limit.
There are some moments only the forest can inspire. Find yours at discovertheforest.org. Learn about forests near you and discover cool things to do when you go. Your moment is out there. Find it at discovertheforest.org.
Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service and the Ad Council.
Here's what you missed on Salacious Life Radio.
You know, when it comes to your children, especially if you're dating someone that you actually like, you do want it to work. So you're gonna hope and encourage the relationship between your child and that person because you like that person, you know. So you're gonna hope for the best. I mean, sometimes it just doesn't work, and you can't make it work. You can't force it. It's like a branch. You keep bending it. Eventually, it'll snap, and even if you put it back together, it'll never be what it once was. But you definitely pray on it. You hope for the best, you know, because like nobody wants to spend the rest of their life alone just because a particular relationship didn't work out, but you had this beautiful creature as a result of it, you know. But you don't want to necessarily spend.
You are listening to BeExposedRadio.com.
Welcome back, good people. This is the final hour of the Conflict Resolution Show. Again, I'm your host, Coach White, and we are dealing with a community conflict today. And we're speaking specifically about how to mentor youth, or how to engage, and mentor youth in the hood culture. And we're specifically talking about young parents today. So we left off on teaching. We talked about two different approaches to mentoring. So tonight's show is an informative show, and my intent to speak to the audience, those who mentor or those who may be looking to get into mentoring. So we talked about two different approaches to mentoring. We're talking about the critical approach. You shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do that, versus the relatable approach. And what I'm trying to hit home, and what I want you to take away from this conversation tonight, is that a relatable approach is an approach that asks questions. The reason why you ask questions is because it's all about gaining an understanding of the young adults that you're mentoring. So one thing that we do in a more relatable approach is we ask questions with the intent of building bridges between you and the youth that you are engaged with. So before we went to the break, we were talking about teaching, learning from watching, and we were talking about peeling the layers of the onion. And when we say that, what we mean is, or rather, the onion represents the issues that the youth and young adults have faced. And as you peel back the layers, you're peeling back the issues, you get to the foundation that brings about the issues, whatever the issues are. And the core of that foundation is really the parents that raised them. So at some point in your mentoring, and you may be weary or you may grow frustrated with the process, because mentoring is a process that you have to be willing to devote to. The parents are involved in this tug of war. So they're pulling the youth in one direction, and you're pulling the youth in the opposite direction in some cases. So what we were talking about during the break is making sure that you have a compassionate heart, period, but especially when you're dealing with the youth that you're mentoring and the parents of the youth. And being relatable, and I'll continue to say this because I wanted to stick tonight, is about asking questions so that you engage them, and that you're compassionate, in that when you hear that response, it's not typically going to be the way you would respond. It's going to be the way they want to respond. It's going to be the way that they deem to be best. So if we just use the name Damon. If Damon is someone that has a young son, little Damon, and you go in with the relatable approach and you see some things that you're uncomfortable with, and maybe Damon in the moment is not leading little Damon in the right direction. So the issue is not necessarily what he's doing or what he's not doing. The issue is what Damon has learned in his parenting from the parents that raised him. So if mom or dad is saying, hey, Damon, you should be doing this or you should be doing that, it may be something that you disagree with, okay? So you want to make sure that you engage the parent and ask the parent so that you have an understanding of why they say these things to Damon and why they think that a certain approach is better than another approach. Ask them a question. Hey, you know, I noticed you told Damon that he should do X, Y, Z. Just curious, you know, why did you think that that approach was more effective? You don't even have to share what your approach is. But you know, I'm just curious, you know, why did you think that that approach would be most effective? And be open to hear them out as to why they think that's most effective. Now, you don't be surprised. Some people would say, well, hey, I raised Damon that way, and he turned out fine. And again, perception is everything. So that perception may be that, hey, I did a good job as a parent. Look at Damon. And the truth of the matter is, our parent is, in most cases, made known by the behaviors of our children. In most cases, not all. Sometimes children do what they want to do. But for the most part, we establish the foundation for our children. So you want to pose that question to the parent, because you never want to present like you're on the other side of the rope. And I'm going to give you this phrase to hold on to. This is something that I've used pretty often. And as I develop my curriculum for mentoring the young parents, I'll roll it out, but you'll hear me say this again. And stay tuned for the webinars, by the way, coming up in the near future. I always say, do not draw a line between me and you. I'm on your side, right? Because you want them to know I'm on your side. I'm on your team. And there's no division between you and I. And sometimes if we're not careful, we can come across as being critical and not relatable or relational, however you want to frame that. So asking the questions, and the intent behind asking the questions to get an understanding as to why they encourage their children to parent in that way. Because again, teaching is about learning from watching. So there may be some things that's said, and they may come from the school of thought of do what I say and not as I do. That's a question that you can pose. Be intentional about it. So you may not say that verbally, you may not express that, but the intention of your heart is to find out how they parent. Are they the type of parents that say do what I say and not as I do? And if so, if they make that known to you directly or indirectly, now you can begin to build a bridge of understanding. And please make sure you hear this tonight. Again, this show is informative. Because you understand something doesn't mean you agree with it. Let me say that like I never said it before. Because you understand something does not mean you agree with it. So you want to make sure that you are compassionate enough to understand how they parent and the direction that they're pulling their children in, so that you know how to approach it, because mentoring is tactful. So once you attempt to peel back those layers, again, you want to ask your mentee the question, hey, you know, I noticed that you said to little Damon that you want him to do this, but I noticed behavior. I noticed that you were doing X, Y, Z. So do you think that he's paying attention? Do you think he's paying attention when you curse, or do you think he's paying attention when you are angry? You think he's paying attention? Have you observed some things in Damon that you see in yourself? And what do you think about that? Do you think if you continue to have those outbursts, you think it'll affect him? Or you think he'll do something opposite? Again, relational requires having an understanding, and having understanding requires that you pose questions so that you can build a bridge based on what the response is. So just hitting on a little bit of these topics. So we talked about compromising. We talked about monitoring. We talked about directing. We talked about teaching. So now let's distinguish the difference between leading and directing. And I'm going to slow down a little bit. You are only leading somebody that follows you. Did you get that? So if you don't have any followers, you're not leading anybody. So directing is something different. You can direct in a moment, but leadership has a more lasting effect for people that's following you. So the question to you as a mentor is, how are you leading? Now last week, and I'm going to park here for a minute. Last week, I wanted to get into coaching. So I'm going to turn the channel a little bit on the coaches out there. So, coaches, whether you're coaching football, whether you're coaching basketball, boxing, MMA, whatever you're doing, you have a huge platform to stand on. You are a person who has followers already. So you are in a leadership role. So what you say and do may have a more lasting effect on somebody that's given direction in the moment. Stay with me for a minute and see where I'm going. There are plenty of coaches, and I'm not being critical. I'm giving you something that I have observed. And I said this last week. There are many coaches who show up at the youth football games or youth practices and they smoking weed or they're drinking. And it's very obvious to the young athletes, very obvious. I want to challenge you tonight to ask yourself, where am I leading my followers? Now, some people are stressed and they, I guess, smoke to deal with stress. Some people are in whatever mood, so they drink. But if you are a leader, you are only a leader because you have followers. So if that's what you're doing, then you're doing one or two things. You're either reinforcing the message they're getting in their own communities, and I'm talking about their four walls, or you're not reinforcing anything, but you're planting seeds in the minds of your followers to say, do this. And we should be very careful with that. So, while we're on the topic of coaches, and again, stay tuned, I'm going to have some webinars coming up for coaches. If you are a coach and every word is a curse word, again, you are either reinforcing what they're learning within the four walls of their home, or you are planting seeds and showing them how they should lead. So you want to be very careful, because again, you have a platform, and when I say you have a platform, you have followers. Okay, so be very cautious of that. You know, where are you leading your followers? And there's only two paths: righteousness and unrighteousness. And again, I say that, and I know that we all fall short. But it's about patterns of behaviors. Coaches, let me say this. When we ask our youth to show up for football practices, track practices, basketball, whatever, there's a term that we frequently use as coaches, and it goes like this: practice makes perfect. Or some have gotten even better than that. Shout out to Coach Jack Bush from Central State in Ohio, where I had the privilege of playing football. he said, perfect practice makes perfect. And I believe that. So when you are doing things perfectly, and let me back up and let's define the things. When you are practicing perfectly, it becomes a habit. So I know that we all fall short, but we're talking about patterns, and we're talking about leadership, and we're dealing with the question, how are you leading your followers? So ask yourself, coaches, are your followers seeing patterns of unrighteous behavior, or are your followers seeing patterns of righteousness behavior? What patterns are they seeing from what you're presenting to them? It's something that I want to have you to pay more attention to as you coach. Now, you may be okay with what you're doing. Again, I'm not being critical, but I will ask you a question to understand you better. Do you think what you're doing is effective? Do you think what you're doing, the pattern of your leadership style, is leading your players or your followers on a righteous path or an unrighteous path? You need to ask yourself that question. Because again, you have that leadership platform. So we have a lot of young athletes who are parents. So if we're not careful as coaches, because there's not a lot of difference between coaching and mentoring. The difference between mentoring is a lifetime commitment. Coaching is seasonal, a seasonal commitment. So in that season, we're mentoring coaches. So ask yourself that question, how are you leading your followers? So taking into a more specific scenario. So you have young parents, young athletes that are young parents. And if we're not careful, we could be influencing them, watch this, to influence their children to lead the way we're leading. So we have to, mentors, coaches, we have to get out of the mindset that we have the right to be selfish when we are amongst the people that are following us. Now, if you're a coach, you know that you have a following. You know that your youth are following you during that season. We cannot afford to be selfish. So we have to love them enough, that's where love comes in, to be unselfish and to know that we have to be cautious on how we're leading them. And love them enough to be mindful of that and to be looking in our own mirrors. So leadership, I just wanted to change the channels just a little slightly to speak to coaches and coaching in that regard. So that's important. So even coaches should have mentors. But again, that's another topic for another time. So we're talking about teaching from a coaching perspective, and I hear the phone lines ringing. If you're having issues with getting through, please write us a comment in the comments section, and we'll try to find another alternative for you so that you can join the conversation. All right, so we have about 45 minutes or so remaining in the overall segment, and I want to make sure that we hit on a couple of other important areas to speak on as it pertains to mentoring young parents who are in the hood culture. So again, it's all about being more relatable than being critical in our styles of mentoring. And again, mentoring is a lifetime commitment. One person comes in mind who is no longer with us, on this side of the Jordan, and that would be Deborah Foster, who encouraged me as a mentor to stay connected. That's why one of my words in my questions tonight was engage. I am committed to, and I don't always do as best as I could, I'm committed to staying connected with the young adults that I mentor. It's easy to be in their lives for a season. Some people connect with young adults because of where you work. Again, some of us are coaches, so we connect with them on the season. But mentoring itself, if it's done right, is a lifetime commitment. So one thing that I admire about the late Deborah Foster is that she stayed connected to her mentees, and her life was such a blessing. She was such an effective mentor on so many levels that her mentees was there for her at the time of her passing, and had the opportunity and the privilege to minister to her even on her deathbed. So if you pour into people and you continue to pour into them, then it will be reciprocated and they will pour back into you at some point. And that's how you can measure the effectiveness of your mentoring program or your mentoring approach by what people give back to you. Some people have said from time to time that they teach because teachers are also mentors, and I applaud you. I know it is rough in our educational systems, but I really applaud your efforts as teachers. But you guys are mentors in a 9-month season as well. And we can't pay you enough for what you do. Even though your platform is from an academic standpoint more so than anything, we can't pay you enough for what you do. But again, mentoring is a lifetime commitment. So my dad is somebody who I wouldn't say that I mentor him now, but when we talk about mentoring young adults in the hood culture, I think about my dad, who is hood, right? Unfortunately, he suffered a disability. But when we talk about giving back, I had the opportunity to mentor him. And he has acknowledged that at some point. So mentors, you have a big task. And I really believe if you stick to it, the more you pour into your mentee, the more you will be applauded. And you may not be applauded right now, but you will be applauded by their parents. At some point, as they grow and they mature, they'll recognize in humility, and they'll come back to you and they'll thank you for the things that you poured into their kids, because you not only poured into their kids, you poured into their kids' kids. So you poured into their grandchildren, and you have been grafted in to their family as a mentor. And what you're doing, thank God, what you're doing is impactful for the future generations of that family. And you may be that one person that God uses to change the entire lineage. And that's a powerful, powerful thing. And I want you to hold on to that. So again, tonight's show is more informative than anything. And it is more so for those who are in the role of mentors, or those who are looking to get into a more effective mentoring role. And I just want to take a pause for a second. If you did not catch the show last week, again, you can catch it on BeExposedRadio.com. You can go to YouTube and type in the Conflict Resolution Show --Be Exposed Radio, or you can catch it on the Conflict Resolution Show page on Facebook. Brother Sadiq Ali was on. He gave some really good insight on mentoring and the direction that mentoring is going in his organization. He's boots on the ground. He's planting good seeds in the community. So check out that show if you have not, just to get some good food for the show that was presented on last week. So I'm also going to back up for a second and take a pause. If you missed the show from the very beginning, I made an announcement and I said that anybody that joins on the show today or calls in or is engaged on the page, if you send me an email, I'm going to offer you a free conflict resolution coaching session. Free is my favorite word in the English vocabulary. I'll offer you a free 1-hour conflict resolution coaching session on any conflicts that you face or that you're facing, present or past, free of charge. If you send me an email, that's Darrell, my name is spelled right behind me, DARRELL white.crs@gmail.com. You send me an email and I will offer you a free conflict resolution coaching session. That's a 1-hour session on any conflicts that you're experiencing now or any conflicts that you experienced in the past that may be affecting you in the present. So just want to take a pause to mention that. Again, we're getting back to the segment today. So we're talking about 2 approaches to mentoring. Give a shout out to Tanya Edison, one of my sisters who are joining the show. I'm so honored that you joining me in support to the show tonight. So there's 2 approaches to mentoring that I discussed tonight. One is critical and one is relatable. The critical we want to stay away from because you can never meet people where they are being critical. The relatable is something that we want to do more of in our style of mentoring, because when you are more relatable, you will find that people will open up to you and they'll be more prone to share with you so that you can help to peel back the layers of that onion and get to the root causes of whatever issues they're facing as mentees and young adults. And if you pay attention, my next word for the day is observing. So we talked about compromising, monitoring, directing, teaching, understanding, and now observing. So the first thing you want to do is you want to observe the young adults that you're mentoring. And you want to be able to see, as we say, you learn more about a person when you're watching their behaviors, right? We hit on that a little bit when we were talking about monitoring, because that was one of the terms that we spoke about today. But you learn more about a person as you observe them. So you want to be close enough, and you want to spend much time with those that the young adults that you're mentoring, so that you can observe how they parent. You can observe the things that they say or what they preach without opening up their mouths. I always say the best sermon that you can ever preach is the sermon that you preach without speaking. So, and you can have that, by the way. But observing those that you mentor. So you want to look at what they're not saying in their behavior. And you want to be relatable in your approach. And you want to ask them questions. Hey, I saw or I noticed you were angry the other day. Your spirit was a little different. You know, I can kind of discern that. And I see how what you did affected little Damon. And Damon is my name of the day. I see how what you did affected Damon. Let me ask you a question. Do you think if maybe, you get upset from having that phone conversation, you think if you walked away and probably went to your journal, or if you walked away, or just took a time out, that you would have had a different impact on Damon versus having that outburst? You know, what do you think? And you ask those questions to cause them to think about how their behavior, or the behavior that you observed, affected their child. So again, and you'll hear me say this over and over again, and I'm going to sell this approach on my webinar. You want to say the things that cause them to think about how they behave, and then they can begin in their reflection time to draw the or make the connection, so that they can see how it affected their child. Okay, so observing. So make sure that you take a lot of mental notes for the young adults that you're mentoring, and begin to have the conversations with them and ask them questions about what you observed, so that they can again look in their own mirrors. And again, mentoring is a process, so they may not get it right away, and I pray that you love them enough not to become frustrated, because it's not light switch, it's a process. So keep that in mind as you are mentoring the young adults. So again, compromising, monitoring, directing, teaching, understanding, and observing. So, and we also talked about the difference between directing and leading. So we did speak about leading as well. And leading is something you do when you have followers. So your child is following. So with that being said, I posed a question on my live, and Edison, I'm glad you joined us. Cardi B has made a statement last February, and I brought this up last show. And one thing she mentioned is that I am not your daughter's role model. So one question that I posed on my live feed before the show began is, do the Cardi B's get a pass when they make that statement? They're not your kids' mentors. Now, Sister Christy Data, she joined, and she said that she doesn't get a pass. And she doesn't get a pass because our children are in the audience. And unfortunately, and I'm paraphrasing, social media, or what they put on social media, has exposed us tremendously to their lives off stage or off set. And our kids are paying attention to those things, and they could be led in one direction or another based off of that. And then Brother Dwayne joined, and he said, well, she does get a pass for making that statement, because entertainers, their job is to entertain. They are in the industry, and we need to take the attention off of them, and we need to put the attention on the parents, which is the reason why I put the attention on the parents tonight. And I never thought of that before. So I wanted to kind of bring that up and to get your take on that. Some people are led to say that celebrities get a pass. Some people are led to say, nah, you don't just get a pass because you put that disclaimer out there. And Brother Sadiq mentioned the same thing as well last week. Nah, you don't get a pass. So I wanted to kind of get your take on that. And we talk about leading, because again, our kids are following these celebrities in some instances. And to my surprise, and I don't follow Cardi B, and no disrespect, I'm sure she's phenomenal, but I didn't know she had gang affiliations, or allegedly has gang affiliations, according to the article that we read last week. So we definitely want to pay attention, young parents. when we talked about monitoring a little earlier, we talked about being mindful of what we exposing our youth and young adults to, or our children to, if we're young parents, and who they're following, because our children are being led by somebody, but hopefully they're being led by us. So we went over leading, we went over observing, we went over understanding, which we can't go on, we can't say about enough. Teaching, directing, monitoring, and compromising. So the next word we're going to focus on is, let's see. In fact, I want to go to another article real quick. And I hear the phone lines ringing. I'm sorry if you're calling, you can't get through. I'm not sure what's happening right now, but you can leave a question in the comments segment on the show, and I'll be sure to reply. And if you can't get through, leave that comment as well, and I'll give you another number that you can call to be on the show directly. So I wanted to look at another article, but I'm having a little challenge with pulling it right now, so I'll come back to that at another time. So when we talk about young adults in the hood culture, we're talking about a great population who may or may not know how to parent effectively. So if you missed the earlier part of the show, we were talking about how if we're not careful, we can find ourselves in a tug of war with the parents, because again, they are responsible for establishing the foundation. And we talked about the importance of being relatable even in our approach with the parents, because we can get weary. In fact, I can recall, and I'll share this story, I can recall mentoring a young adult, and I had a job set up for this particular mentee, and it was showtime, $17 an hour. The young man was excited about the opportunity, did really well in the interview, walked him through interview prep and things of that nature, helped the young adult with fixing a resume. So he was good to go. The resume was good. Got the job opportunity. But then the parents said, hey, wait a minute. I need you to babysit tonight. Oh, I need you to babysit today. So you can't go to that job. So what do you do in that instance? And the parents obviously they're more of an influence. Again, we talk about leaders. They're more of an influence in a lot of instances, more so than the mentor. So we have to be understanding, ladies and gentlemen. And sometimes we just have to chalk it up. And we have to say, well, mom or dad, there was a golden opportunity. I was trying to help Damon to get a job because I know that he wasn't working and he needed, some money to bring in for little Damon. But, it did hurt. And I'm going to be honest, it did hurt. But this is where you really look in your mirror, right? And you say things like, next time what I'll do, I learned from it. Next time what I'll do is I will reach out to you and ask you if this shift is okay, because I don't want to take away from his family obligation, because family is very important and I don't want to impede upon that. And again, I always go back to my statement. I don't want to draw a line between you and I am on your team, and make sure that you have that kind of relatable tone and relatable approach to your mentoring and understanding the parent as well, because communication is key. And if the communication is effective, it builds walls and not, it builds bridges and not walls. Because communication can build walls too if it's destructive. So I just wanted to put that out there. So going back to my notepad here. So again, we talked about observing. We will always talk about understanding, because that's important. Again, this show tonight is an informative show. I'm looking to inform, and I'm hoping that my audience are those that are looking to mentor young adults in the hood culture, or somebody that's already mentoring. So we went over observing the young adult's behavior, understanding the young adult's behavior, teaching the young adult, directing the young adult, and teaching them how to direct, monitoring, teaching them how to monitor their kids' behaviors. And we talked about compromising, making sure that we're having conversations about compromise and how to establish boundaries and to maintain the parental relationship when it comes to young adult parents and their children. Sister Brothers, bless you sister, she's still on viewing, had mentioned that some of our young adult parents are afraid of their kids. And that's a huge problem, right? It's a huge problem. So as mentors, how do we approach that? How do we approach when we are observing and we observe that there's a fear factor between the adult and their kid? You know, how do we effectively mentor in those moments? So I pose the question. Let me give you a potential approach. And let me, again, it's informative tonight, so I want to educate you. And I hear the phone lines ringing. I'm sorry. It must be some kind of technical difficulty. But again, if you leave a comment and let me know who you are, I could probably give you an alternative. So when it comes to that fear, there's one coin and there's two sides of a coin. So fear is on one side and faith is on the other side. And you can never have the two intermesh. So fear is always the enemy of faith, and faith is always the enemy of fear, right? So when you are observing the young adult, you might want to say, hey, you know, I observed as you were engaged with little Dame, and I noticed that you were a little hesitant to intervene at times. So tell me, what was that about? You know, why the hesitation? You know, and what did you think about the behavior that you saw? And then you kind of engage them in conversation so that they can open them and tell you, hey, you know, well, I saw little Damon and he wanted XYZ, and you know, and maybe the argument is this. I know that he doesn't see XYZ or is able to play with XYZ too often. So, you know, I'm not really comfortable with it, but I let him go ahead and do it. So as the mentor, you want to have that kind of conversation where you say, okay, so what made you uncomfortable about intervening with little Damon when he did XYZ? And then they'll share that with you. And then you can begin to understand them even more, because the information that they put out there to you, the more truth that they tell you, the more you can build on that truth and begin to have more edifying conversations with them about their parenting and about what they fear. And then you can begin to minister to them and talk about faith. Well, if you think that, and we talked a little bit about compromising, if you think that that was something that Damon shouldn't engage in, then let me encourage you and tell you some ways that you can intervene without fear. And the bottom line is, we as parents, and not just young adults in the hood culture, we as parents have to understand that our role as parents will always supersede any other role that we have. So if you are a parent that wants to be a friend to your kid, you have to understand that your role as parent will always supersede your role as their friend. So when you say that they can't do something, then they can't do it. Now, I will encourage you to explain to them why they can't do it. I think we have to kind of be willing and loving enough to move away from do it because I said so. Because there's something missing in that communication. Why is it because you said so? People who have more of a dictator approach to parenting frequently make that comment, do it because I said so. But I hope that you will be loving enough to be able to communicate why you said so, because your reasoning why could be that one thing that they need to hear to make them understand why you parent the way you do, and so that they can further make a decision as a young parent as to whether they will take that approach or they won't. But be loving enough to have that explanation there. And I know you don't have to explain anything, but be loving enough, and I just want to encourage you to be loving enough to be able to explain why you said that they should not, and be able to stand firm on that. If you're saying that they shouldn't do something, then they shouldn't do it because you love them and you don't want to see them engage in that behavior. You don't want to see them engage in whatever they're engaged in at the moment. So be open enough to explain the why you or the why or the reasoning or rationale behind why you don't want them to engage in that, and don't feel like you are compromising who you are as a parent by giving that explanation. Now, that's a different story if they're saying why, why do I have to do that, and their tone is off. Then you don't have to necessarily explain anything, and you can communicate that. But to avoid the question why, I don't know if they'll ask why or not, but to avoid the question, just provide the explanation up front, and I hope that makes sense to you as a young parent. So when you walk in faith, and I'm kind of getting back to that, when you walk in faith, you also walk in love. So walking in faith, love, and truth, all they're in sync. You can't walk in truth without walking in faith. You can't walk in faith without walking in love. And you can't walk in love without walking in truth. So all of them go hand in hand, and fear is an enemy to all three of those things, right? So you want to make sure that as a young parent, and let me speak specifically to the young adult mothers in the culture who have little boys. Little boys are naturally aggressive. Little boys are naturally rebellious. And you have to stand firm on the truth. The truth is you love them too much for them to engage in that behavior. So you told them no. I told you no because I love you and I want you to be safe. I told you no because I need to be honest with you, and I need to tell you the truth. If you continue to do that, and I want you to always make sure that you mentor and make sure that your young adults know to be thinking about the future and not the present. So I want you to write this down if you are a young adult in the culture and you listen to this, and even as a mentor of the young adults. you want to make sure that they always think about the future and not the present. It's easy to be caught up in the moment and to say that our kids can do something in the moment. But the question is, if that behavior continues, or if they do that one thing now, how will it affect them in the future? So, number one, always consider how your present action will affect your future behavior. We live in a time now where people are trying to recant some of the things that they've done in the past, right? And they're making statements like, well, I was young, you know, that's why I said this, or that's why I did this, and that's why I did that. And they're at a stage in their life where they don't walk the same way anymore. So you need to really make sure that the young adults are considering their future and not their present. All right. The other thing I want you to make sure that you expressed when you're mentoring, when you're with the young adults, is the fact that not only what they do now as young parents will affect the future, but what they do now in the present is either something that is consistent with righteousness, or is consistent with unrighteousness. That's important to know in the moment. When we talk about the moment, when we're talking about being, we talked earlier about the word directing. So as they are directing their kids in the moment, what they're doing, and again, I'm not talking about directives, giving a directive saying do this or do that. I'm talking about present behavior. Provides direction to the kids that they are parenting. What they are doing in the moment is either righteous or unrighteous. So make sure that they are aware as to which path they are demonstrating, right? Make sure they are knowledgeable about what they're doing, right? And how it's affecting the kids that they're raising. That is extremely important, because I don't think that young adult parents are thinking about being directional. I don't think that they're thinking about their behaviors. And let's take this into consideration. Even that phone conversation that they're having while their kid is present, they're not necessarily, in some cases, not all cases, they're not necessarily thinking about the ears that are listening to those conversations, right? They're caught up in the moment. But if they're cussing, they're using profanity, if they're talking about something negative, be it guns, be it selling drugs, or whatever. It doesn't have to be those things. It could be anything that's unrighteous. They're caught up in the moment in that they are more focused on the conversation than the ears around the conversation. So I encourage you as mentors of young parents to make sure they're cognizant of the direction or the directing that they're doing. Even in those moments when they're caught up in phone conversation, and it may be an emotional conversation, and there's nothing wrong with emotional conversations. It's something wrong with emotional conversations that are being held in the presence of kids that are listening. And the conversations are negative, right? And kids will mock what they're hearing. Kids are mocked what they're seeing. And if we're not careful, if too many conversations are going on in their midst, then over time, it will bear fruit to their behaviors. We'll see the behaviors, and we'll be able to see the fruits of our parenting in the behaviors that they express. So we got about 5 minutes on for the show. And I'm going to the comments. So Sister Edison said, unfortunately, old school parenting roles have faded out. I agree. And maybe it's because old school parents don't exist anymore. This is the new school of parenting now that we see. And even grandmothers are in their 40s, early 40s, late 30s. I'm scratching my brain. Most grandmothers now are probably early 40s. So, you know, grandmama, who was in her late 50s, some of us were fortunate enough to have great grandmothers. Not too many great grandmothers are around anymore. At least if they are, I don't know about them. So yeah, so in order to be old school, Sister Edison, or in order for it to be old school parenting, the old school has to be in the community, right? And I think our communities are void of old school parenting. So what's happening is the new school is here, and they are establishing the new standard of child rearing. So that's where we are with that. So, but thank you for your comment, and give a shout out to my brother from another mother, Tony for Race, who has also joined the show. Thank you, good brother, for joining us. We have about 3 minutes or so before the show ends, and I want to thank again you guys for joining. And I want to take a moment to say next week we are going to be talking about intra-spiritual conflicts, and this is the first time we're going to be having this segment. Intra-spiritual conflicts. We're going to talk about this. We kind of talked about this first show that I had, but we were talking about it more of, or from the perspective of being a community conflict and not a intra-spiritual conflict. We're going to be talking about music impacts on your spirit. How music affects your spirit. So we're going to have Brother Tory on. We're going to have Sister Mary on next week. It's going to be a really, really exciting show. And wow, I mean, I'm really excited. Excuse me. So I hope you join in next week to the show and be available to give some feedback. And again, I hear the phone lines ringing. I apologize. I'm not sure of what issues we're having with the phone lines, but again, if you leave a comment, I know we have like less than a minute left in the show. I wanted to provide you with a number to call as an alternative, so you can be a part of the conversation. So, Brother Tory and Sister Mary will be on with us next week talking about intra-spiritual conflict. So please tune in and be a part of that conversation. It is going to blow your mind. And think about it. And pose a question to you in closing as we close out today's segment and kind of introduce the next segment. What do you listen to when you're on the way to work? Think about that. And why do you listen to it? Some people listen to whatever they listen to because it's upbeat, It's like coffee. It's like morning coffee. I have something with my kids I do in the mornings, in school mornings. Fortunately, I don't have school tomorrow. But we call it morning coffee, where we get up and we do our 5-minute boot camp exercise, and we open up our scriptures and we read a scripture on faith from Hebrews 11:6, and that's like our morning coffee. So what is your morning coffee as it pertains to music? What do you listen to, and why do you listen to it? And what does it do for you? What does it remind you of? A lot of things that we listen to affect our behavior if we're not careful. It affects our psyche if you're not careful. What do you listen to? You know, I work out. What do you listen to on your workouts? What do you listen to motivate you? What do you listen to when you want to get in the mood? Whatever mood. You put your own thing behind that. But what do you listen to? So we're going to be digging into that next week. Now we're going to talk more about negative music, more so than positive. So I'm very excited about that. And the 9 o'clock hour is at hand. This is the Conflict Resolution Show. Thank you guys so much for joining us. And I hope you can join us again next week. You may not hear clapping at the end of this segment. That's usually how we sign off. And again, if you call, I'm so sorry that we could not get to you. Something was going on with the phone lines. I apologize. But hopefully you could check in and send me an email. We can still have a conversation maybe midweek. I'll go live from the Conflict Resolution Show page. So I'm signing off for tonight. You'll still see the cameras up for a moment until we shut it down. But thank you for joining us. And stay tuned for this segment next week. Stay tuned. And peace. Enjoy your weekend. And your week rather. And stay warm. Thank you for joining me.
My name is Ruth Rusi. I'm a retired teacher. I'm 91 years old, and this is how I live united. I say retired, but not really. Once a week, I read books to children as part of United Way's education program. Reading to a child creates links between language and literacy. It creates a bond between grown-up and child. And believe it or not, it prepares them for a better academic future. Oh, we read about frogs and flies and pigs with wings, all sorts of juicy stuff. It's a joy to watch all those little faces. I figure I have the time and they have the need. And I've always believed that if we're not here to help each other, then what are we here for really? My name is Ruth Rusi. I help kids prepare to succeed in school. So I don't just wear the shirt, I live it.
Give, advocate, volunteer, live united. Go to liveunited.org. Brought to you by United Way and the Ad Council.
My name is Meera Batra. I have been in this country 32 years, and this is how I live united. America has always been the land of promise, and in my community many families have come for a better life. Coming from another culture myself, I know the desire to become part of a community, to feel at home and to gain the tools for our children and families to succeed. So I advocate for these families with United Way. United Way empowers them to look beyond their histories and to see what opportunities are available. We help them get involved with their kids' schools, network within the community, and when we do, we unite them. We make the community stronger. What I do is something I wish someone had done for me, and I am so grateful I am able to. My name is Meera Batra. I help families see opportunities and succeed. I don't just wear the shirt, I live it.
Give, advocate, volunteer, live united. Go to liveunited.org. Brought to you by United Way and the Ad Council.
Keyboard Cat, Hamilton the Pug,